Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining our vBrownBag talk. I'm Kirsten Stoner. I am a technologist on the Veeam product strategy team, and I'm here today with my colleague Rasmus.
Hi, Kirsten. Well, thank you everyone for being here as well. I'm Rasmus Haslund, Principal Technologist, and super excited to tell you a little bit about DR.
Yes, so today we're talking about planning disaster recovery in the multi-cloud. So disasters happen, and there's a couple different types of disasters, right? So you have natural disasters, fire, flood, storm, and then you have like maintenance disasters, hardware failure, natural human error. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. I mean, we accidentally delete things. And then with the ever-increasing threat of ransomware, that is a disaster as well. It could be an unplanned outage that you're not accounted for. So no matter what type of disaster, you should have a set of instructions to follow to make sure you can get your applications, your machines back up and running for your business to make sure that you continue operating as normal. So what is a disaster recovery plan? Do you guys know what a disaster recovery plan is? Anybody? We have one? We have a couple people? Okay, awesome.
This is much better than zero. Sorry, you're off to a good start.
Yes, so a disaster recovery plan is just a list of instructions that you need to follow when an unplanned outage occurs. So how do you get started creating your disaster recovery plan? First, you want to understand your environment, understand the application your businesses rely on, what its capabilities are. If you have an application, how many machines does it involve? Does it rely on multiple servers to run? Next, you want to, define your recovery time objectives and your recovery point objectives, making sure you understand, how much downtime can your business afford to lose? How much data can it afford to lose? And, making sure that you set this out so you know what to expect when you need to recover. Involve key business stakeholders. This is just to make sure, so if your boss, your manager knows, hey, we need to have this application always running, maybe you're replicating it, you understand that is the requirement of your business, and that you guys are both on the same page. So if you know for a fact that your application is going to take you 3 hours to fully recover, then your boss also knows it's going to take 3 hours. It's not like they're expecting it only to take 1 hour and you're not meeting their expectations. And then also documenting the entire DR plan, right? So you're starting to create your DR plan. You've identified your critical applications, its functions, what it relies on. Next, we want to document it. So when that disaster happens, you know what to do. You know what steps to take. You're not in a panic saying, what do I restore next? What does my Active Directory server rely on? And different things like that.
So if you try and think about some of the plans, right, Kirsten went through a lot of the steps, and these are all good steps, but haven't been in a situation myself where somebody, blows off the dust of the good old DR plan, and you have to try and maybe even test it. Well, the first step is already the one you've taken. You actually have a plan. And what happens often is that there is no plan at all whatsoever. Nobody thought about this. So having a plan, that's already the first step. But also just keep in mind, right, for us, my old job, that was basically a yearly occurrence. Often servers mentioned didn't even exist anymore. New services have been built. Servers have maybe been migrated to new servers, as we did not do a lot of in-place upgrades, so it would be new servers instead. And then finally, as we went through, credentials might be out of date, or as we realized we had to go to this server to get credentials, but that server is now offline in this little simulated outage. So it can be quite tricky, which takes us down to the documented plans here, but also just outdated plans. And then finally, on the list, I think a lot of customers I've talked to, at least, they start out, they have just one environment. They get some backups up and running. They have Veeam running there. At some point, they realize maybe we should have a DR plan. Maybe we should have a secondary location. They get all of that stuff built up, but then they forget to kind of move Veeam over to the other side. And so when the primary side goes down, well, then the option to bring everything up on the DR side has also walked out the door. You first have to start bringing up essential services on the other side, and then we can start restoring. So how can we avoid a lot of this, right? Testing is not just necessarily for the microphones. It could also be used for the plans that you have. We want to make sure we can execute on things. And the more regular we can do that, the more likely it is that when you actually need to run it, that only very few, or ideally none of the steps, will actually end up in a failure of some sort. But also, Kirsten was talking about managing expectations with business stakeholders, right? Great, they said this should be up and running in 3 hours or a day or whatever it is. But if we didn't really test it, or it involved a lot of manual steps, is that an accurate measurement of how long it truly takes to bring it up and running again? Often not. It's by having it automated, where the system is doing exactly what would be happening, you can get much more precise numbers and document them on a regular basis, so you know it wasn't just a single snapshot, but this is consistently the numbers that we're getting. Going from just sort of the one plan can be, of course, a little bit tedious there, but I always try to suggest here, don't just go ahead and think of this as we need this master plan for everything, because it can be a daunting task to try and build that. Maybe instead, try and say, what's the most one singular critical workload that we have running? Start with that, right? Figure out how we're going to test that this works. Again, that can be a big task. A good place to start could just be looking at the existing monitoring you have, maybe with VM1, for example. What are we looking at? And then we can start using those same tests when you start bringing the environment up in DR. Run the same tests, you'll have a good idea if those services are running and available. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really good about orchestrating disaster recovery is you also are eliminating those manual steps, right? So we said like a problem with disaster recovery is human error, right? So if you can orchestrate that and automate that, you can eliminate that error. So when it is time to recover from that disaster, it goes more smoothly, it goes more as expected, which leads us to some of the challenges that we face today. So we talked about out-of-date DR plans. What worked 10 years from now might not work today. Technologies change, applications change. You might be deploying applications in the cloud compared to, on-premises. So you need to make sure that you're keeping up to date with those applications, their requirements, and what it would, require to restore that application to keep your business up and running. The taxing, daunting testing, we talk about testing. It might take a while. It might just be, your test, you don't want to do the test because it might take a whole weekend. No one wants to use their weekend to do a DR test. I'm sure you guys have other better things to do, but it's very important to do the test. I think you were talking to me earlier, Rasmus, about how, you were doing a test and, it was just a simulation and you found out it took you longer to recover than normal. And it was really important that you did that test so that you knew what to expect when, maybe a cyber attack happened. Next, we think about manual errors during recovery, and that's really what orchestration is going to help eliminate. You also said to me, you gave me an example, me and Rasmus were talking about this earlier, about how you missed one line of an instruction and you had to go all the way back and redo the whole thing. That sounds painful, doesn't it? So really, these are some of that's another challenge that you face when it comes to DR. Documentation, having to document the entire process. If you have a really big environment, it can be painstakingly tedious to document it all. So one of the things you could do, right, is, start with one application and go from there, test it, find its dependencies and different things like that. And then compliance gaps, making sure that you're meeting compliance and you're following the regulations of the industry your company might be in or the requirements of your business. And to help combat these challenges, we have Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. So this is going to help you prepare for a disaster and recover more efficiently when that disaster happens.
And when you do want to do the recovery, maybe you have your own DR site. Fantastic, great. Just keep in mind there might be some things that need to be adjusted, right? When we do tests, As an example, maybe some of you already did data labs with Veeam, for example. But a common little thing just to keep in mind is, for example, if you have dependencies on Active Directory, well, what are you going to be bringing up? Are you using a domain controller from the production side? Well, what if that's not available? So you want to make sure you kind of build it up. But if you don't have that, maybe you could orchestrate to something like Azure, for example, or one of the very trusted service providers and the extensive network that we're working with. Lots of good places to spin up things, small or large scale. Now, if you think about this, Kirsten talked a lot about documentation. And as tedious as that is, even just to build it once, even more of a struggle I find is to then maintain that afterwards, right? Because things are ever changing. And again, this is where Recovery Orchestrate is basically building the documentation for you. Because you say, well, how can it do that? Well, because all of these small tests that you're adding in, all of the information that you're inputting, so we can do those tests, we take all of that and build the documentation in an automated fashion for you, which can then be provided on a regular basis along with the results so that you know you're compliant, you're meeting those requirements that you have in the business, and you can actually see that it starts up so that you can know with confidence, should we need to do this, that it will in fact work because it was tested this very week. Yeah.
So yes, we are running out of time here. We have a couple seconds left, but we wanted to say thank you for attending our session. If you want to learn more information, be sure to check out the Veeam booth tomorrow when the expo hall opens and get a demo. You want to see a Recovery Orchestrator in action, that's the perfect place to start. Or you can schedule a meeting with a Veeam expert and get a private demo. They can answer your questions, help you out, help you get started, maybe give you a free trial. And I think that's all we have today.
Perfect timing. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.